Guys, can you hear? Jake,
Yeah,
can you hear them?
no, I don't hear them.
No, yeah, that's the point.
Hold on.
You gonna call him? I call him.
You want to call him? Call him, please.
Call Mandy Aaron with WhatsApp.
Calling Mandy Aaron with WhatsApp.
Hi, my dear. We don't both have we don't have
Wants to get on. He can't get
audio. No. We don't have audio. We don't have audio.
on. Have audio.
Not only me, nobody has.
Nobody has audio.
Yeah, we can hear each other, but there's no audio.
And we're working on it.
Love you. Thank you.
Okay.
Did you hear?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Wonderful to see you. Are you
Oh, now we can hear.
hearing a document in a minute? More a minute on that one.
Your co-host now.
Okay, great.
Everything
Thank
should
you.
be good.
Okay. We are now sharing. Mandy, am I good to go? Good to start?
Yeah,
Great.
we
thank you.
have it.
Good morning, dear friends. Thank you so much, Mandy and Hani, for inviting me to fill this slot. A special thanks to Rivka and Yossi Ryman, who, aside from sponsoring for everyone, the opportunity to remember someone who was really a formative figure in my life, especially in my career. Bella Hochberg, Zichrono Livrocha, is a special privilege. She was one of the most concentrated sources of positive energy that I have known in the universe. That she, as I have had occasion to mention, her signature phrase was wonderful. And that is the way she described most relationships, certainly her relationship to Torah, her relationship to community, to her community. And when you were with her, you felt better about yourself and the future of the planet, because she really did believe it. And so the shiur that I've selected, or the selection that I've selected to study in her merit, is really, for some of you, I assume, your first introduction to a remarkable book, one of the great classics of the Musar library, probably the only one written during our lifetime, a book called the Alei Shor. Alei Shor was written by Rav Shlomo Wolbe. Rav Shlomo Wolbe is one of those people that it took almost all of the events of the 20th century to produce such a character. He was born in Germany. His name for the first part of his life was August Wilhelm. He was he was born to a rather assimilated intellectual German family. And when he was at university in Berlin, he became a Baal Tshuva through an organization that was reaching out to German Jewish youth. And he went on to study in the Hildesheimer Seminary, and then subsequently ended up in the Mir Yeshiva. The Mir Yeshiva at that time was the locus, so to speak, of one of the great Musar teachers in the golden chain that goes back to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter himself, and that was Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz. Rabbi Levovitz had, at that time in the early 30s, recognized that there was a sudden influx of young German Balei Tshuva who were coming to the Mir with a fine secular and classical education already behind them. I mean, these are people who routinely, as high school students, mastered, aside from German and English, mastered Greek and Latin and the classics of those literatures. And Rav Levovitz, and this is really one of the, it's one of the astonishing moments of light in modern Jewish pedagogy. He realized that he could not simply throw these young men into the same curriculum which was being used for the traditionally trained Eastern European yeshiva bachrim, the regular Litvische bachrim who had grown through the cheder and yeshiva system and had come to the Mir as classical Talmudic scholars. He realized they needed something more. And so for these German students, he created a kind of a yeshiva within the yeshiva and gave them a foundation in Jewish thought, which set them apart and made them very important resources for the world as it emerged, especially after the Second World War, because the ability to understand both worlds and to translate the terms of one into the terms of the other was in rare supply. We'll see that in a few moments as we just dip into Rav Wolbe. Rav Wolbe went, when the Mir Yeshiva was getting ready to move to Shanghai, he was a German national, which meant he was stuck. He couldn't go with them to flee to China, which anyway looked like a long bet. Happily, there was a young man in the mirror with him from the famous Lehman family. And Bert Lehman was a Swedish citizen. And he took Revolby home with him to Stockholm, where he was able to spend the war. And he took him there as the private Rebbe of the sons of the Lehman family, basically his brothers. It was there that he met Manfred Lehman, who would go on to become a great philanthropist and an endower of Torah programs, particularly in memory of his son, Jamie Lehman. There are many, many different things that the Lehman family endowed. From Sweden, he spent time in, I believe he went from Sweden to Switzerland, where he studied in Montreux. He studied there with the great Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg. And they say that while he was in Switzerland, he also studied with the great developmental psychologist Piaget. I hope I'm getting all of this right. So that what emerged from all of this was a fusion of the tradition of Musser, which was highlighting ethical development as the core of the education of a Ben Torah, melded with a very refined psychological insight. As a result, the Alei Shur is a place where one can encounter a very traditionalist approach, but with an exquisitely refined psychological sensitivity. And the Alei Shur is, in its form, I'm not sure if it was actually designed to be only that. Let me just finish the biography. In 1946, Revolby came to Eretz Yisrael, became a co-founder of the Ber Yaakov Yeshiva, where he served for almost 30 years as the Mashgiach Ruchani. He left that in 1981 and went on to found and head several other projects centered around the teaching of Musar in the modern context. He was particularly moved during the Six-Day War, which he was sure would ignite a tremendous movement of tshuva in the Jewish people, and he wanted very much to be part of that. Our lives momentarily intersected. There was a young man who served in my shul as the Chazan Sheni for a period of time, who was born in England, raised in Israel, and Revolby was a family friend. And one of my trips to go and see the students from our shul in Israel, he said to me, "Would you like to meet Revolby?" And by that time, I was already a fan of the Alei Shur. I completely bewitched by it. And it was as if you had, said to my grandson, "Would you like to meet Aaron Judge?" So I took the opportunity and I went to Revolby's modest, tiny little apartment in Mattersdorf. And I just sat with him and asked him very personal questions, including guidance on how to raise my own children, who were toddlers then, but had already shown, the trajectory of their personalities. And I think if I'm ever called upon in the next world to catalog the most formative single hours of my whole journey in this world, my hour with Revolby will certainly make the final five. He was just so authentic and available and present. You didn't get the sense that he was because what happens to many of us as we get older, I'm speaking of myself. I learned this model from a professor of mine told me that Wordsworth had the misfortune of doing his greatest work as a young man. He wrote the lyrical ballads. They came out in 1798, and he went on to live into the 1840s. I mean, he was still alive when Queen Victoria took the throne. The problem was that once he wrote the lyrical ballads, he spent the rest of his life doing his Shakespeare imitation, doing his Wordsworth imitation. In other words, trying to figure out how does he convince people that he's still who he was. So that befalls a lot of people. I did not sense any of that in Revolpi, that even in his older years, he was still being. He wasn't trying to recapture something that was part of the past. Anyway, that brings me to the little selection today, which I guess I could bill as something to whet your appetite for his thought, but I think it's also of tremendous practical importance. We all experienced just a whisper of a halachic, I wouldn't even call it a crisis, maybe a tiny fork in the road, maybe a micro decision. In most of the Tisha B'Av manuals, the books, that have the davening and the kinos and Eicha, when you go to say your morning blessings, before you say the bracha, she'asa li kol tzarki, thank God for giving me everything I need, all of my needs, the fine print says, many, don't you hate when they do this? Am I the many or am I the other? Many delay reciting this until after the fast. So, mapitom. That little note is based on the Abu Dram. The Abu Dram says that the thrust of the bracha she'asa li kol tzarki, God who has given me everything that I require, is fundamentally for the moment when one puts on one's shoes. And because, we know that the morning blessings are more or less follow the order of waking up in the morning and experiencing the world, right? Malbish harumim, clothes that as we put ourselves together, so to speak, we acknowledge God's contribution. So the Abu Dram said, Asali Kol Tzarki is a bracha on putting your shoes, and therefore no one took any shoe seriously unless it was a leather shoe. And therefore, since on Tisha B'Av morning we're not wearing our leather shoes, we say, well, this is not quite an Asali Kol Tzarki. I think I'll wait until the evening. However, what about the other team? What do we do with the bracha, those of us who say it? So in the course of this discussion by Revolbi, he will offer his interpretation of the meaning of the bracha she'asa li kol tzarki. But how he gets there is fascinating. So don't worry if this looks like daunting Hebrew. Not to worry. I'll sort of jump in and out of it and summarize. But Revolbi writes the Alei Shor along the conceit that he is talking to a young man who is adjusting to life in the serious yeshiva. Imagine it's written to 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds. That's the psychological point. However, I say conceit because I believe that Revolbi's messages are much more applicable and repercussive. They are hardly a manual for the sincere teenager. They touch on things that are common to all of our existence. And he begins this particular, this is one of a series of what he calls michtavim, letters, which may have begun as actual letters that he wrote to young men who were having difficulty in yeshiva. And he begins, Ma ma'od ani margish itcha tzarcha al halimud she'eno holech. I feel for you that you've hit a rut and you think that your learning is You're not making any progress. Kosher lechol, and here's the description of the symptoms. And it is in this list of symptoms that the universality comes in. Kosher lechol lihisrakes, your concentration is off. Imachavrusos ein ha mishtave, and you can't get along with your study partners. In other words, your relationships are somehow askew. Higata linikudas hashefel, and you feel yourself, you've hit rock bottom. Vehincha mechapes etzos, and you're looking for advice. And he says, let's back up. He says, how did you get to this situation? And he says, b'matzavim ka'ele muchachim mikodem levarer. How'd you get here? And when you figure out why, then you'll figure out how to get out of it. He says, because for these months, you've been working and you were energized and happy, and suddenly that sense of well-being has been replaced by pain and sadness and difficulty in concentrating and in a loss of your success. In other words, you suddenly find that you've lost your edge, you've lost your way, and you don't know what to do about it. And he says, and he characterizes it, he says, you're in a situation where you are surrounded by your friends, your colleagues. You're all engaged in the same thing, right? You're all there for the same purpose. And yet you begin to look around you, and everyone's particular characteristics are beginning to emerge. In other words, we know who's the guy in the class who has the best memory. We know who's the guy in the class who understands what the teacher is saying immediately. In other words, what began as a race where everyone was at the starting gate together at the starting line, the runners have begun to separate. The ones who are leading the pack, the ones who are further behind, and then the ones who are trailing. And you're beginning to wonder, what about you? And he says, the problem here is that in watching this process, you are more and more focused on others who define you negatively. In other words, I'm less so-and-so than this one, I'm less so-and-so than that one. And you are keenly aware of what's going on, so to speak, at the edges of your personality, at the edges of your capability. But what that means is you're neglecting what you have, who you are, because you're allowing yourself to be defined by what you're not, namely by what others are doing. Now, the 2 points that he has made so far, this is where I feel that this is an extraordinary and universal message. Number one, he is describing pretty accurately the experience, or at least one of the manifestations of anxiety and depression. The symptoms of depression, the loss of interest, the loss of concentration, a sense of not fitting in, of disturbance of relationships. And furthermore, he's describing, he's getting at the origins and the etiology of this process. And then he hits with the sledgehammer on the second page. Second page, the beginning of the first new paragraph. Hargasha zu nikres kino. What you are experiencing is envy. Tezos but let this be your comfort. Ki kol seir sovel mikino. That jealousy, I would say jealousy based on unfavorable comparison, is the fate of most young people. Now, I would just bracket here, in my own opinion, I think the world in which we live, which is a world generated by a particular culture of media and advertisement, is a world in which the sense of envy has permeated. It's no longer the affliction of the young. It's part of our lives. And every time you see a TV ad for an automobile, the purpose of that ad is to make you envious, to say that's what one should have and that's what I don't have. People go to the mall in order to be bathed in envy. Envy, the notion that what I need is what is beyond me and not is what is within me. That's why the culture of shopping is antithetical to the Torah enterprise. You know, everyone's worried about, and there's reason to worry. Everyone's worried about violence and pornography and yada, 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 yada. Jealousy is among the most pernicious and corrosive elements. And that's why when Chazal talk about Ezu Asher Sameach Bechelko, Sameach Bechelko doesn't just mean I'm good with what I have. It means I am capable of generating true simcha without adding anything, without the notion that I need another acquisition or another achievement in order to have what I need to bake the happiness cake. Ech bechelko means I know I don't have to go to the store. The ingredients are already in my pantry for baking the cake called happiness. So he speaks about this, and then he goes on, and one of his great, I think, a real interpretive genius is when he says that the bracha of sha'asa li kol tzarki, the meaning of that blessing is asserting that God has given us what we need, not only for happiness, because remember, in Jewish thought, you know, don't worry, be happy is not exactly our mantra. Our mantra is meaning, and meaning is defined in terms of, are we in the service of the Most High? Avodas Hashem, pure and simple, but not defined for everyone the same way. Are we in harness, so to speak? Are we useful to the Almighty? And usefulness is variously described. But sha'asa li kol tzarki, the bracha as Rav Volbe reads it, is a bracha which says there is no barrier between myself and fulfilling my mission. There is no barrier because there's something that I don't have, something I didn't get, something I need to acquire. I begin with the assertion of belief. What I have, where I am, who I know, is sufficient to act as my platform for Avodas Hashem. And he goes on to cite a passage toward the bottom of the page. I'm not going to learn it inside, from the Or HaChaim HaKodosh's interpretation of the story of Cain and Abel. And he says that Cain's mistake is that he doesn't understand, and he uses this, he brings this phrase, ki hakedusha eino tzaricha le'acherim. The achievement of true holiness, almost by definition, does not require others. In other words, the capacity to achieve meaning, holiness, service of the divine is something which is contained within each of us. And the task is to try to understand oneself, to do an accurate accounting of what one brings to the table, so to speak, to see oneself in a light which is not flattery, but which is utility. Because, you know, always when I deal with clients, and there are some clients, their whole message is, I need you to ratify that I am miserable. Right? Let me tell you how miserable I am. And I'm supposed to say, yeah, boy, you're really miserable. Told you, you know, I knew it. I knew I was miserable. But then I say to them, is that really what you want as your epitaph? You want to be remembered, it wasn't my fault because, you know, I didn't get enough this, or I was given too much of that, or this befell me, or I never quite managed to X or Y? Is that, you want to settle there? I mean, it's your prerogative. I'm here to ratify. If you need a teacher's note saying that your non-life is someone else's fault, I'll sign it. What do I care? Were they going to sue me? I'll sign the note. But is that all you want? And then the trick is to turn around and to say, okay, let us acknowledge all of the challenges. Let us acknowledge all the people and factors surrounding you who could have done differently, could have given differently, could have been other. We'll acknowledge them. But then let's stop creeping around the edges and looking out. And let's come back to the pantry. And my favorite cooking shows, I love cooking shows, right? Cooking shows with exotic ingredients, I'm not impressed. You know, if you tell me that you have, you know, special cloves grown in a special orchard in Zanzibar, which, by the way, is one of the world's leading producers of cloves, in case you were worried. You have this special exotic ingredient. Don't worry. You can get it on the internet for $4,000 a pound. It's like, I stopped reading the recipe. I'm impressed with those shows that go into the apartment of a 31-year-old bachelor and say, I'm going to look in this guy's refrigerator and in his pantry, and out of what this ne'er-do-well has, this guy for whom shopping means getting more beer, I'm going to look in his closet, and out of that, I'm going to make something. Oh, now I am interested. Now I stop ironing and pay attention, because somebody is going to make something out of what someone has, not out of what you could sell them. So Rav Wolbe finishes this beautiful session where he basically instructs this young man, find yourself and stop chasing your friends. And very interesting, along the way, he says, you know, that guy who picks up the shiur immediately, and it takes you 5 reviews until you master it. Who's going to really remember it? And more important, who's going to value it? The guy who remembers everything he ever read. But Is he going to go beyond the surface? Is he going to delve into it? And as he moves through these attractive attributes one by one and proves that the person who doesn't have them has a different line that leads to excellence, a different kind of excellence. And in the end, he tells a little story. He says Rabbi Yosef Salant had a Talmud, a great Talmud, Rabbi Amsterdam, this well-known figure in Musar. And Rabbi Naftali once said to him, you know, Rebbe, if I had the mind of the Shagas Aryeh, if I had the spirit of the Yesod V'Shorash Avoda, right, was known for the depth of his spiritual acumen. He says, and if I had, speaking to his Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Salant, and if I had this is Rabbi Yisrael Salant. He said, if I had your character, Oz Yacholti Lavod Hashem, boy, would I be able to serve God then. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter turned to him and said, Naftali, with your brain and with your heart and with your midos, you could also serve Hashem. And that's how he finishes this passage. He warns us that envy can leave us feeling that we have no value. We have no possibilities. But turning from other and looking to ourselves and beginning with the affirmation, Sha'asa li kol sarki, I have everything in my possession already, which I need to serve God in the way that He has ordained for me. From there you can begin, and along the way, you might even be happy. Yes, sure do.
Emphasis of, Hasamet B'Chalko, and you should realize that, as you put it, the ingredients within yourself to be happy, then that's so much of an emphasis. And I think it's a great, attribute, and people can really focus on that. Then where does one get the impetus to try to improve, whether it's doing more good things or learning something new? If you're too content, and then where do we go from there?
Good point to clarify. He is not talking about being content with your achievement. He's talking about being content with the tools you have with which to achieve. In other words, he still assumed, because the problem with envy, in the way he sees it, it leads to a kind of paralysis. In other words, when a person goes into depression and can't get out of bed, doesn't matter, they're not going to achieve anything. So he is talking about contentment with attributes, with one's basic tools, but that is not a replacement for being active. And he seems to imply, as I read him, that once you get excited about your own tools, that itself will spur you on to do more, to be more active, more engaged, more energized. But thank you for the clarification. I think that was important. I didn't. Yes.
Yeah, I went to Mary Yeshiva, and every week there was a mussar for the whole school, and they talked about, not keeping up with the Joneses. And I find that today, that's old hat, because now it's not just keeping up with the Joneses, it's doing better than the Joneses. Joneses, the neighbor spent $50,000 on a car. You go spend $60,000 and get a better car, because you have to one up.
Well, you have to understand the way the modern culture of envy works. Notice the guy in the ad for the car.
Plain Jane.
He's always got his neighbor watching him. because we have only two modes. If it's not going well, then we are envious. The idea of going well is that others envy us. The need to be envied is as much a contingent identity as the other. And by the way, you can fall. Religious achievement can be just as much a commodity in the envy game, if you're not aware, as cars and houses, because there are people who, they make sure that everyone sees them in whatever level of achievement. They need the external referentiality and approval, etc. So you're right. And one of the things I love about Revolbi, you never get the feeling that he is just producing. What's the word I'm looking for? He's not just selling the company product. He doesn't just talk about Bittul Torah and Kavadat Torah, and sometimes I thought that's what you want to say, in the discourse of yeshivas, sometimes it sounds like it's all infomercial propaganda to sell you more yeshiva. Revolbi really enters the psychological kind of an existentialist realm where he asks questions, the answer to which is not just be more like me. Actually, he was in theoretical terms, he is one of the great champions of creating a system of chinuch which does not douse individuality, which is predicated on finding the individual talents of each student and working with them on that, in addition to making them part of this, always in that dialectic of creating someone who's a member of the community, of the tribe, so to speak, but who is not lost as an individual. He has a very fine book on education called Tzmicha Ubinyan, which means growing and building, where he works on this dialectic. Yes, sure.
I've heard someone speak about, and correct me if I'm wrong, using these words interchangeably, that there truly is a difference between envy and jealousy. And I heard it explained once that, like, jealousy is, you see your neighbor's car, wow, that would be cool, that'd be nice. Where envy really builds inside of you, like, I've gotta have that car. Not like, oh, it'd be nice if I had that, but like, the envy is a much stronger, compelling. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts. Yes.
I'm not sure that's.
Can be used interchangeably.
Yeah, I'm not. In modern parlance, I'm not.
Yes, he agrees.
I think when somebody is envious of somebody else, it's either I have to get it or he has to lose it.
And if you're jealous.
If you're jealous,
It'd be
just,
nice.
I wish I
Right.
had that also.
You are now in the realm of the Oxford English Dictionary and semantics, in which I'm not qualified.
I think it's just a matter of degree. I think it's the same, it's a continuum. You could be jealous or you could be mamish envious. I think it's just a degree. I agree with the rabbi.
I think in both cases, it comes down to one thing.
So,
You're not happy with what Hashem giving you. You want more, and you can't accept that what God has planned for you is the right derech for you. You think you know better in both cases.
Because we're human.
Yeah, human is tough. Human is tough. Yeah, but I think Revolbi is saying, I think he would agree with that. But remember what happens if remember how he framed this. He framed this as speaking to a young person. If you have a kid who not doing his homework, or not studying for his tests. And I get this a lot in with clients and families. I do everything I can to discourage them from using the L word. When you describe that kid as my son is lazy, what you have done is essentially placed a moralistic spin on it. And you're saying he's not a good student because fundamentally he's not a good person. He doesn't have a good character. Volbe is doing just the opposite. Volbe is taking this young person who begins where he finds him and is going inside the feeling with him. This young man is at this moment in his own eyes a failure, is worthless, has disappointed everyone. He's not going to pile on that and say, well, you just have to work harder. If you really believed in Hashem, you would work harder. You would get your homework done and you would study for your test. That pummeling drives a kid into the ground. I see Honey sees, she knows from experience.
Thousands.
That child needs someone to go inside of that experience and say, let's figure out, like, what goes on when you make the decision not, is it very often, I mean, I'm not going to keep everybody here all day, but we could swap war stories. Some kids are so desperately afraid of failure. They're afraid that they've been told all their life, you don't have potential. Oh God, I hate when they say that, people. You don't have potential, which means the only reason you're not successful is because you're not using your potential, as if it was up to you. And what's really happening there is a child who is so terrified that what will be uncovered is that he or she really doesn't have all this potential, really doesn't have what it takes. And so they would rather fail by their own hand than give up at least their definition as being someone who could succeed under the right circumstances. So the danger with, and not, you're not a direct collision, but the danger when you begin to say that the problem is that someone doesn't believe that Hashem has X, Y, or Z. As soon as you say the words doesn't believe, you say that this person has a theological or a moral failure. Most people who end up that, it's because their hearts are broken and they're a little misdirected. And what they need is someone to climb inside of it and be their supporter and be their fan. The number of kids who have been rescued because some teacher decided not only that they would not fail, but that they were not failures. Some teacher treats them as if they had discovered treasure and makes them believe that they really are that treasure. And then all the pent up, the paralyzed talent and ability starts to pour out. All right, I think we'll call it there. Thanks, everybody.
Just one note, correct me if I'm wrong, by his own wishes, I don't think you mentioned it, Rabbi Wolbe never translated Shiur into English.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Sorry?
I said it's not available in English. Hello? I lost you already.
They cut us off. I didn't even goodbye, but I have to say time to say goodbye to you, my friend.
How about me?
Nice to see you. I see also Leo. I see Nathan, and I don't see Rabbi Rosenblatt anymore. I see this. I see the ceiling. I see ceiling.
Have a great day, Janusz.
Have
Have
a
a
good
great
day.
day. You guys have a
Okay.
great day.
Okay, be good.
Love you guys. Nice
Bye.
to see you.
Same here.
Nice to see you.
Take care.
Jay, when you came on, everybody else left.
Magic touch. Thank you, Nathan.
All right. Have a great
Have a
day.
great day. Bye-bye.